We're in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Partnerships and Community Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome our next guest onto the show, Rasika Rajagopalan. She is the Director of People and Talent at Pacaso. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of your podcast, so it's such an honor to be here. My name is Rasika. I use she, her pronouns, and I currently serve as the Director of People and Talent at Pacaso, as you just mentioned. So in terms of what do I want to be when I grow up and how I answer that, I love that question. When I was, quite a bit younger, I wanted to be a teacher. I think part of that comes from the fact that it was what I was most exposed to, just being in school and all of that. But I actually also really loved kind of building my own little businesses when I was younger. I would, have this little restaurant for my family. We did the hair salon thing, thrift shop. And so I think I always just also really loved entrepreneurship, which is what I think, has attracted me to the startup industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurial things that you're doing in your role right now. And restaurant is a game that I also played with my parents and my grandparents. Also, I can definitely relate. You fast forward to now, you are leading the people and talent team at Pacaso. How do you think your personal journey has really led you up into this point, and specifically at Pacaso as well?
Yeah. So growing up, I think, I was really fortunate to be able to watch a lot of my family members absolutely love what they did professionally.
Yeah.
I would see them leave for work super fired up. They'd come home with tons of excitement and energy around what they were working on. And I just saw how much positivity and how much impact it brought into their lives. So for me, growing up, doing something that I was really passionate about was always really important to me. So, fast forward to my first professional job, and I just wasn't feeling that. I was, working in this small research lab. My work wasn't making tangible impacts that I could see. And then my lab at the time, we didn't really have the funding to invest in culture. There wasn't really, a ton of resources to support ongoing education, learning and development. There weren't resources to help me think about, my long-term career path there. And so I recognized really quickly how much of a gap that was. And so, I started reading a lot about what these other tech companies were building and how they were investing in people and culture, right from, how they were being thoughtful around hiring people that were passionate about the company to then continuing to invest in their growth and development over time, how they were kind of thinking about building community with, their employee base. And so all that stuff really, really resonated with me. And it, I kind of felt like that was just table stakes for companies, right? Like you're bringing in people, you want to scale their impact, you want them to grow with you, to feel connected to your mission. And ultimately, that's just good business. And so I really wanted to be a part of that. I kind of pivoted into the people and talent world. The rest is history. So in terms of Pacaso and what kind of attracted me, definitely mission first. I heard about them on launch day and was like, this is such a cool idea. I love what they're doing. And then just with my initial conversations with, the leadership team there and the employees that I spoke to, it was very clear to me that they were very aligned with, how I also thought about, investing in people and culture and it being, table stakes and building a successful company. So.
Absolutely. I think that's so important, especially as a company is in hyper growth mode, you're expanding your team. It's really intentional. And it's like you said, the word investment in resources, time, and really building that up. Your non-negotiables for the company is so important. I'm sure that there are so many things that you are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I have a couple of questions around kind of your strategy, but want to open up the conversation by asking what the number one thing on your mind is right now. It's taking up the most brain space.
Yeah, so in general, I mean, just continuing to scale remote culture and how we do that well is something I'm always thinking about. Pacaso, like many other companies now, is distributed first. And I think we've all just learned so much about that over the last couple of years. And when I say, scaling remote culture, it's not just the fact that we're all on Zoom and we're all working in our own, office spaces, that is definitely part of what, remote work means. But what I've also observed is that remote work has kind of changed the game for companies in the sense that you're growing a lot faster, right? Pacaso, at the beginning of the year, we were less than 30 people. We'll be 175 people by the end of this month. And so, companies can grow faster. You have employees across so many different geographies, which is new, sometimes across the entire world. And so I think, these are really great assets and strengths. You can build a really diverse team and you can scale a company quickly. There are also a lot of challenges that, people teams are navigating for the first time, right? Like running payroll across so many states. How do you offer competitive benefits plans when you have employees in so many different states? And the way that certain carriers can support one state versus another are different. What does communication look like when people are working, different hours? How do you build a sense of connection, right? When you're bringing in people across the world in a world where you don't have, shared spaces. And so I think we've done a good job this year, but it's always top of mind for me in terms of learning how other companies are thinking about it, and how we make sure that we keep our finger on the pulse in terms of distributed culture.
Yeah, creating those meaningful moments of connection, understanding that everybody is in a different place. I love the idea of accessibility to more job opportunities and working with different teams asynchronously as well. And we're talking about benefits and all these different kind of strategies. It all goes up to company culture. And I wanted to know from your kind of perspective, what are qualitative and quantitative ways you think about measuring company culture or employee happiness in general?
Yeah, so for us, we do look at a lot of quantitative measures. So we look at ENPS, or Employee Net Promoter Score, which is a number that you get when you kind of ask the question on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend Pacaso as a great place to work? And that one's great because a lot of companies ask this, so you can kind of benchmark yourself against other companies. We also look at retention, we look at Glassdoor reviews, we look at the rate of people getting promoted, how many people are referring talent, how diverse is your team. So these are all really, really great numbers to keep pulse on. But qualitatively, I look at what's the dynamic on Slack and in team meetings. Do people feel super motivated around your company mission? Are people actively contributing and sharing innovative ideas in meetings? Are your core values showing up in action? And so I think this blend of quantitative and qualitative is really important because raw numbers don't, not only do they not just tell you the entire story, in some ways they're a little bit delayed, because you only do surveys so often. You may only get a bad Glassdoor review with a very polarized opinion. And so for me, investing actual time in meeting with employees to kind of gauge these qualitative measures have been important in, getting ahead of the curve before something becomes a larger trend in your data.
Absolutely. You don't want to have kind of one metric or one number running the strategy for everything that you're doing. It definitely has to be holistic and understanding
Right.
where people are ongoing basis. I think that makes sense and is also table stakes for an organization as well. One of the metrics you mentioned is kind of the rate of internal promotion and things like there's so much research around when people feel like they can grow in their career, they have opportunities to learn more, to develop, that they are more likely to stay and be behind the mission as well. What does like internal mobility paths look like at Pacaso, and are there professional development opportunities available for the team?
Yeah. So we've grown so fast at Pacaso, both in just size and scope, that I always say you literally cannot escape growth and professional development, even if you tried. And it's what I love about working in disruptive startups and why I've been attracted to them my entire career is that literally everyone, including the CEO, is doing something they have not done before, and everyone is learning. Your role will cover double the ground that it did 2 months ago every 2 months. And so formally, so that's informal, right? Formally, when it comes to professional development, we do have 2 cycles a year where employees have these career growth conversations with their managers. We also offer workshops on a monthly basis with a range of topics around, how to build your public speaking skills. What are some frameworks for strategic thinking? How do you build psych safety on the team? And so we offer a lot of those spaces for people to come together and learn. In terms of mobility, we're in the process of building formal levels in the org. So, what's the difference between a director versus a VP, or a manager versus a senior manager? What's the difference in the scope of problem solving, and the scope of influence, right, in these different levels? And I think that will bring a lot of transparency to how we think about growth. And, it also serves as a tool to kind of have those conversations. But we're basically year one from when we kind of launched out in the world. And particularly in year one, I would say we focused a lot on building a culture of empowerment and cross-functional collaboration versus, focusing on like a lot of that formal leveling. Because in general, for us at Pacaso, hierarchy really has little role in how much impact you can have, right? Whether you are on the executive team, or whether you're kind of, very early on in your career, whether you've been here for an entire year versus if you've kind of been brought on, 2 weeks ago, that has very little to do with how much impact you can actually have, because of the culture of empowerment that we've kind of built. And so I think that too has played a role in both mobility and growth at our company.
Yeah, absolutely. Ideas can come from anywhere, innovation can come from anywhere, and that innovation is shared when there is that trust built within the organization and you feel like you're actually going to be listened to as well. I think that kind of two-way is really, really important. And you touched on this a little bit in terms of empowerment and really intentionally fostering that environment with your team, especially with new team members who are bringing in all different kinds of work experiences with them as well. I definitely want to ask how you see this culture of listening and employee feedback management as a really important tool to kind of build out the culture at Pacaso.
Yeah, I mean, it is so important to listen because every company is different. And I think listening and gathering data is what enables you to build the culture, build around the culture of your organization versus making the mistake of rolling out cookie cutter programs everywhere, like the way that you recognize and build recognition programs at one company might not work somewhere else. And I think every company has unique strengths and gaps, and every team, even within a company, has its own unique strengths and gaps. So I think listening, doing surveys, gathering feedback, these are just great data points that give people leaders a guide on what to prioritize. I also think it gives you a baseline and data to measure success because I've always believed it's really hard to improve what you can't measure. And so when you gather feedback, you can say, okay, what's current state? What do we want to do about this? And then is this actually getting better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is really important also in terms of the follow-up and kind of understanding that change doesn't happen overnight, but sharing like what is a priority, what's happening with employees is definitely important as well. Can you share kind of an example, no matter kind of how it was kind of bubbled up in terms of employee feedback, initiating a change in a process or initiative or strategy at Pacaso because of that employee feedback?
Yeah, so this one might seem seemingly small, but when I joined at the beginning of the year, we were, like I said, 30 people, and it was really hard for us to provide a robust set of employee benefits at that size. Like the relationship that you have with insurance companies as a 30-person company looks very different from the type of programming that companies will offer, a much larger company. And so when I started, a lot of the feedback was around that, right? Picasso values health and wellness. We do Wellness Wednesdays. We, prioritize that, but yet our benefits programs weren't as robust as, other larger companies that our employees were coming from. So very much heard that, wanted to take action on it. And because we, in the period of just a few months, were able to grow very quickly, we were actually able to offer a much more robust suite of benefits. And so, myself, I spent a lot of time understanding what was important, what people valued when it came to, medical, dental, vision, just general benefits overall. And we worked really strategically to make sure that whatever we offered was robust in, all states across the U.S. since we knew that we had a distributed company. So it was definitely an interesting challenge to solve, was not easy, but happy to kind of share that, the last survey that we did, people shared a lot of great feedback around our new benefits plans. We did an entire kind of relaunch a few months ago, and it's been great to kind of show employees that, whether it's just, about our benefits plans or about something else, like we will listen, we will kind of take initiative. And I think, that kind of helps people feel empowered to continue to share feedback and, feel like they're going to be heard.
I definitely think that benefits is a big thing, definitely not a small change as well. So I think that's a really good example of just like people are asking for this, and this is what we can do at this given time, providing context behind it as well, and having that conversation with your team. And ultimately, when we're talking about company culture, people do their best work when they feel like there's a growth path, they're behind the mission of the company, but also when they feel like they are included and that they belong and that they can share these ideas to promote the innovation of the company as well. So I know something else that we wanted to discuss was Pacaso's intentional diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. I wanted to ask you kind of what are the goals behind the current strategy and how are you thinking about measuring progress, knowing that this is ongoing work and we're not looking to check a box, but celebrating small and big wins is also important.
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, I think we've just been so fortunate. And I have to give a shout out to our CEO, Austin, who's been such a strong partner and champion of these initiatives from day one.
Yeah.
And I think we've really been able to proactively get ahead of a lot of these things because we prioritized this when we were, like a 20-person team, or really like from day one, right? I think too often companies grow to 500 people, they look at their diversity numbers, they look at the sense of belonging, and they're like, oh no, this is not good. How do we address this now? And you can move the needle then, but it's a lot harder, right? So for us, our strategy, we started at the very beginning with our leadership team talking about why DEI matters. Like, why is this important? Everyone's starting to invest in this stuff, but why? How does it connect to our mission? And so I think there was a lot of buy-in across the team. We did a lot of training and enablement and continue to do that around how to equitably hire. And so I think, from the very beginning, our teams have actually been diverse. So whether it's gender, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's, the entire employee base, or just looking at our leadership team alone, we have a lot of representation among the people that are making hiring decisions, that are making business decisions, which I think is really, really valuable. And then we've also, focused on building programs that support ongoing development, ongoing inclusion and belonging. So we have an internal diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that leads a lot of initiatives. Most recently, today's Veterans Day. And so we showcased a lot of stories from veterans that we have on our crew and how their experience as a veteran has, provided really great lessons and life stories that kind of impact their day to day as they show up in their role. And so we just kind of capture a lot of those moments. We celebrate key holidays, key occasions. We have some of the tough conversations together as we kind of learn as a group. And so, I think it's ongoing, but we do a lot of surveying to kind of see, do people feel like their opinion is valued here? Does leadership actually invest in diversity? Do people feel like they belong? We score really highly on those questions. And I think it's just a question of, continuing to measure that, continuing to make sure that people feel aligned with the mission, that they, have relationships with others across the crew, that they can voice how they feel when they feel like they need to raise something, and that we kind of acknowledge and address whatever it is that comes up.
I love what you said in terms of also really being behind kind of investing in diversity, equity, and inclusion from the start. When you're 20 people, it is never too early to start and really bake that into the DNA of the company as well. So when you do grow to hundreds of people, it's just something that is table stakes as well. And another piece of that, besides kind of senior leadership, which is so important, is kind of people managers also and middle managers being invested in kind of that equity mindset too. And I wanted to ask in terms of accountability, how you see kind of those managers, both like new and tenured, really being accountable to practice equity-driven leadership in their roles and in their processes.
Yeah, there's so much here. I mean, I once read an article a few years ago, and it was one of those that has always resonated with me, which is, accountability in your culture is who you hire, fire, and promote. So I think, when we say that we are investing in diversity and belonging and equitable leaders, it really shows up when, we hire people that also value that, when we make sure that the people that we promote into people management roles are true champions of that. So, we have a lot of quantitative roles on our team, right? We have a large sales team. And for us, it's really important that, our people managers not only drive results, but are also really strong and compassionate leaders as well. So I think that's always super, super important. For us, I would say The way that we coach our managers to onboard their teams is very equity driven, in the sense that every single employee in the company that comes in gets 30 minutes with every executive, and they kind of talk about
Yeah.
their team, how you can partner with them, what we're working on. And so I think it sets everyone up in the company with the same set of context as whether you joined a year ago or whether you're joining today. It opens the door for relationships, right, across the crew. And I think it builds this common bond around our mission. So that type of expectation of like, what does it mean to be a manager? How are you going to be onboarding people? How are you going to be setting them up to succeed is important. And then like more operationally, we have, formal leveling, formal compensation bands, so that, managers are set up with tools to kind of think through, are two people in the same role that are doing the same thing? How are they getting compensated similarly? What does that look like? And I think that kind of helps that equity piece as well.
Absolutely. Providing those resources is so important to folks, and really having an understanding. I like that article, Who You Hire, Fire, and Promote. I'm going to kind of look that up after this call too, because I definitely agree. It's about the people and who you're bringing on, and just being about the mission, and the values of the company as well. I know we talked a lot about kind of your journey to Pacaso and the strategy that you're currently implementing, but just based on your experience, so shifting away from kind of Pacaso, what are some common mistakes you've seen kind of other companies out in the world making in their people strategy, especially right now, understanding that when people are innovating and redesigning systems, there are going to be mistakes even with the best intentions, and that's okay. But I just wanted to ask your opinion there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to see so many companies investing in people and talent as a whole. And I think from that we've seen a lot of systems and processes emerge and get implemented early on. One mistake that I see companies make is really just at a foundational level, not giving their people leaders an actual voice. Like, you'll have the standard onboarding program, you have your standard performance reviews, but how often does your people leader share important information about diversity and culture at your all crew meetings? Like, how often are your other executives showing up for initiatives that your people leaders are driving? And so I think these types of things really matter, because employees can see when leadership values the people and talent function. And it has ripple effects to how bought in people are to your mission, to your core values, all these programs that we spend so much time and resources building. And so I think without that voice and empowerment, the impact that your people team can have is limited. And I'll share one more kind of mistake or limitation that I've observed is there are some people teams that don't invest the time in getting to actually know their people. So you kind of get in this rhythm of building these programs, but are you actually sitting down with every employee at some point to understand their unique experience? Is your leadership team doing that? So one thing that I love that Austin, our CEO, does is he sits down with every employee, and early on we do that once a quarter. On the people team, I do that with every new hire after they've been here about a month. And I just think that it just builds a connection, it builds a relationship. Every unique experience matters, and I think it helps you kind of build programs that are truly going to drive impact and address the needs that you have at your organization.
Yeah, I definitely agree that every unique experience matters, every connection and relationship that you can build at the company. And people in general know when folks are being authentic or not, or there's just lip service provided, but there's no action behind it. But the fact that Austin meets with everyone and there's that 30-minute time to meet with different executives as well is really important, dedicating your time to this too. I guess the flip side of that question would be kind of knowing the information that we have now about the future of work and where we are today. What's a must have that people leaders need to incorporate in their strategy to be super successful?
Yeah, I think you're seeing this more and more. But I think it's so important for people leaders to really understand the business. Companies are growing faster. They're so much more complex than they used to be. The things that employees need, the foundational skills that people are required to have on the job is evolving so quickly. And so I think it's really important for people leaders to understand the business so that they can proactively respond and also advise, right? Like, it's your job to support the business through people, which goes so much more beyond, putting together events and and programs. And so I think you have to join the right amount of business meetings. You need to ask critical questions. You have to understand the inner workings of, the operations team, the sales team, the product roadmap. I think all of that enables you to be a much more impactful leader. And then I kind of mentioned this earlier, but you have to work it into your strategy to understand that each person is different. Make the time for the one-on-ones. Hire, the right amount of people support, so that you can be really personal about it and not, robotic and kind of too process driven around this stuff.
Absolutely. You don't want to over index on it, but you want to be really intentional and holistic around what you're providing to folks as well. Is there anything that I either didn't ask you in our conversation, or maybe 1 to 2 key takeaways you want to underscore for folks who are listening, maybe something they can take with them?
Well, first of all, this was such a great set of questions, and especially someone that has had a podcast myself. Like, I mean, I just have to give hats off to these questions. I think they were just so thoughtful. One thing I will just add, and your podcast is a great kind of avenue for this, is that I think that there's just so much we can learn from each other. The field of people and talent has changed so much. It's been changing over the last 10 years. I would say the last year, since the pandemic, since this kind of surge of remote work, it's exponentially changed even more. And I think that, we all win when we all share best practices, when we share what works, what didn't work. So this podcast is great. If there are articles that people can write, forums that other HR professionals want to create, I found that so valuable. And also, I think it just normalizes the importance of investing in culture. When you see other companies talking about it, it becomes more and more and more table stakes to put dollars and put investment in this stuff, mind share into this stuff. And so I just, continue to encourage other companies and people, professionals, to take that step and just sharing learnings and wins.
Absolutely. There's so much that we can learn from each other. There's so many avenues to do it. We're not alone in this work, which is really helpful to understand, even if it feels like we're here to solve so many different problems and just, do a million different things. I think it's important to have that cohort-based learning, whether it's internally or with other kind of people folks and talent folks in the space as well. Rasika, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture. I really enjoyed our conversation this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you for all that you do at AllVoices. I think you have an incredible product. And, when we talked about bringing voice to people teams and to companies, shedding light on strengths and opportunity areas, there's such great value in what it is that you're building. So congratulations for all your success so far, and here as a supporter through the next chapter.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the future as well, and looking forward to keeping in touch with you. And as a reminder for folks who are listening at AllVoices, we really believe in that employee feedback management as a requirement for the company to succeed on a whole. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.